The first thing you notice during a blackout isn't the darkness, it's the silence. A deep, heavy quiet that swallows up the hum of the refrigerator, the buzz of the lights, and the gentle whir of the furnace. For most of us on Cedar Lane, the storm that knocked out the power was an inconvenience. For my wife, Marianne, it was a matter of health. The oxygen concentrator she needed for her emphysema sat silent and useless in the corner of our living room. But I was prepared. I'd saved for 2 years to buy a small, reliable Honda generator. I'd even checked the old HOA bylaws, there was nothing against them. I wheeled it out to the driveway, gave it a pull, and its beautiful, throaty rumble broke the silence. A light in our window. Hope. Marianne's breathing eased almost immediately. The peace lasted 20 minutes. The headlights of a golf cart cut through the twilight, stopping directly in front of my house. Walter Higgins, the HOA president, stepped out, wrapped in an expensive coat. He was followed by Brenda, his right-hand woman, clipboard in hand. "Bill," Walter said, not as a greeting, but as an accusation. "You know you can't run that." I gestured to my window, where Marianne's silhouette was visible. "Walter, Marianne needs her oxygen. The power could be out for days. This is a medical necessity." Brenda consulted her clipboard. Article 12, Section 3, no outdoor mechanical equipment shall be operated which creates audible noise deemed a nuisance to the peaceful enjoyment of other lots. This generator is a clear violation. I stared at them, the cold seeping into my bones. A nuisance? Brenda, it's keeping my wife breathing. Walter's face was stone. Rules are rules, Bill. We can't make exceptions. If we allow it for you, we have to allow it for everyone. Soon the whole street will sound like a construction site. It's a blanket rule for the good of the community. The good of the community? I said, my voice rising. What about the good of my wife? I'm sorry, Walter said, without a shred of apology in his voice. You have to shut it off. Now. Or we'll have no choice but to levy a $500 fine. Per day. I looked from his rigid face to Brenda's averted eyes. The generator's hum, once a sound of comfort, now felt like a target on my back. With a shaking hand, I reached down and turned it off. The silence that rushed back in was deafening, and it was filled with the sound of Marianne's struggling breath from inside the house. Walter gave a curt nod. Smart move. We'll be checking. They drove off into the dark, their cart's lights sweeping over other dark, silent houses. That was the longest night of my life. I bundled Marianne in every blanket we owned, listening to each labored breath, feeling utterly helpless. The temperature plummeted. My anger was the only warm thing in that house. It was a slow, burning coal in my chest. The next morning, I tried to reason. I called every member of the HOA board. I explained the medical necessity. The responses were variations on a theme. I'm sorry, Bill, but Walter is very firm on the rules. They were afraid of him. They hid behind the bylaws, using them as a shield against having to show an ounce of human compassion. By the second night, the cold was dangerous. We huddled by the fireplace, but the wood was running low. Marianne's lips had a faint blue tint. Desperate, I ran the generator for 1 hour, just to power her machine and heat some soup. Within 30 minutes, Walter's cart pulled up. He didn't even get out. He just shone a flashlight on me, and held up a printed sheet, notice of fine, $500. I turned the generator off. As his taillights disappeared, something in me broke. Not into pieces, but into something hard and sharp and determined. They weren't just enforcing a rule. They were choosing bureaucracy over human life. My Marianne's life. As I stoked the dying fire, a plan began to form. It wasn't a plan of anger, but of patience. They saw my generator as a nuisance. I would make it the most coveted, necessary thing on this street. I would make them need it. I would make him beg for it. The revenge wouldn't come from a place of rage, but from a place of cold, calculated waiting. The storm wasn't over. And the next one would be mine. For 2 more days, the blackout continued. The neighborhood grew colder and quieter. People's cars sat useless in frozen driveways. The food in our freezers began to spoil. My world shrank to the 4 walls of my living room, keeping Marion wrapped up, reading to her by candlelight to take her mind off the struggle for air. I saw Walter once, marching down the street with his clipboard, inspecting the damage from the storm. He looked smug, as if the widespread hardship proved his point about maintaining order. He didn't look cold. I heard his home had a large, natural gas whole house generator, installed before the new noise rule was added. Of course, it was exempt. His rules were for the little people. I continued my quiet preparation. I siphoned the gas from my car into a jerrycan to conserve fuel for my little Honda. I didn't know when I would need it, but I knew I would. My chance came on the 3rd night. The temperature dropped to a record low. Pipes began to freeze all across Cedar Lane. At first, it was a distant shout from a neighbor. Then another. Panic started to set in. And then, a different sound cut through the night. Not a shout, but a high-pitched, frantic knocking on my own door. I opened it to find Walter Higgins. But it wasn't the Walter I knew. This man was pale, his hair disheveled, his expensive coat thrown on over his pajamas. He was shivering violently. "Bill," he stammered, his breath forming clouds in the air. I need to use your generator." I stood in the doorway, saying nothing. I just looked at him. "It's my pipes," he pleaded, his voice cracking. "The main line in the kitchen wall, it's frozen solid. It's going to burst. The water damage will be catastrophic. I need to plug in a space heater to thaw it out before it's too late." The irony was so perfect it was breathtaking. His rule, his unwavering, heartless rule, was now threatening his own precious property. I remained calm. "Walter," I said, my voice as cold as the air. "You know I can't do that. Article 12, Section 3. Audible noise is deemed a nuisance. I wouldn't want to get a fine. Or be a nuisance to the community." His face crumpled. "Bill, please. This is an emergency." "So is my wife's oxygen," I said, my words hanging in the air between us. "That was a medical emergency. This is a plumbing emergency. You told me rules were rules. You fined me for trying to keep my wife alive. Why is your pipe more important than her breath?" He had no answer. He just stood there, shaking, defeated. The powerful HOA president was just a cold, scared man on my doorstep. I didn't do it for him. I did it for me. I did it to prove a point that this street had forgotten. "I'll make you a deal, Walter," I said. "You can use my generator. Right now. But in the morning, you will rescind my fine. You will bring the entire board here, and you will publicly apologize to me and my wife. And you will immediately propose an amendment to that bylaw, creating a clear exemption for medical devices and emergency use. And you will campaign for it until it passes. Do we have an agreement?" He nodded frantically. "Yes. Yes, anything. Thank you, Bill." I wheeled the generator out. The sound of its engine starting was the sweetest sound I'd ever heard. It wasn't just the hum of a machine, it was the sound of justice. The next morning, True to his word, a humbled Walter Higgins and the entire board stood on my lawn. He apologized, his voice low but clear. The fines were wiped away. The bylaw was amended within the month. The neighborhood found out what happened. Not from me, but from Walter himself, who had learned a lesson in humility. My generator didn't cause a nuisance. It became a symbol. A symbol that community isn't about blind rules, but about helping your neighbor. That sometimes, the strictest rulebook is worthless compared to the simplest act of human kindness. And on the coldest, darkest nights, when I hear a generator humming somewhere on our street, I don't hear a nuisance. I hear the sound of a community that finally learned what it means to be one. The moral of the story is that true strength isn't in enforcing rules, but in knowing when to bend them for the sake of compassion. Your dignity and the well-being of your loved ones are worth standing up for. Have you ever faced a situation where a rule overlooked basic humanity? How did you handle it? Share your stories of standing your ground with kindness and strength in the comments below. And if you believe in justice served cold, subscribe for more tales of everyday heroes.